Okay, I'm so glad all of you are back. And once again, I apologize for not being able to be with you on Tuesday and have us have to make a reschedule, but sometimes it's out of our hands, isn't it? So last time we were together, the session ended with us starting with the very first sentence structure, sentence expansion that you should teach your students. And remember, stick with fidelity to the process. In other words, it's already been proven these are the order that the strategy should be taught in. And today we're going to finish up with the other strategies. And then the next time on Monday when we meet, we're actually going to move into, each time it's a little higher level. So next week, we will start looking at how you can use a single paragraph organizer with students. The expectation obviously is not going to be a paragraph that you would expect from higher level students, but you get to lay the groundwork and make it easier for them to be able to do that as they progress through the grades. So we already know that the to be determined was determined just a few minutes ago. We'll meet Monday. That's April Fool's Day. It just dawned on me as I got ready to say Monday, April 1st. It's no fool. It's not a trick. We'll meet. Again, there's the course objectives for you that we always keep in mind, that these strategies and templates, everything that is involved with TWR, the expectation is to help with all four of these others so that students understand a purpose for why they write. So we're going to start with number 2, the basic conjunctions. The basic conjunction strategy, because but so, is absolutely a fan favorite from TWR. Lots of authors have included it, other authors have included it in their books because it is so powerful. To be such a simple strategy, it is powerful, and you're going to see that as we move along. But the first thing that you have to teach students is the definition. This is what we're wanting them to tell us when we use because but so. Because but so tells why, but we changed that to it tells the reason why, because we want to use that language with kids too. Students are familiar with this word in their oral language, and here's where we have the opportunity to show them how to use it in a written language structure. But shows a change of direction. And one of the videos that a teacher uses in introducing it is with the fingers changing direction. So I've kind of added that into my repertoire because I think especially kindergarten, first and second grade, they're going to really hone in to that. But it's a change of direction. And what you're teaching is contrasting thoughts that will help students be able to answer questions and tasks and prompts as they progress through the grade levels. So is the trickiest one. So is cause and effect, or we can say the result. The result. The problem, and it's been proven, it's harder for K2 students because they are very familiar with so, but they use it as a modifier. I love candy so much. And so that's one of the reasons that so is not introduced in kindergarten. Kindergarten's going to stick a lot with but and so until you think they can move on. So let's take a look at this chart, and you do have access to this chart within the files in the participant folder. But we want to teach these three conjunctions in a very specific way. The reason is because these three, you are laying the foundation for them to use more complex language later on. When you see the examples, which some of you may have already looked at, you're going to see what I'm talking about. Kids need one of the things, especially by the time seventh grade, it's claim and counterclaim. So this is the beginning of giving both sides of the story, because we're going to tell a change of direction, but we're going to do it in a way that K2 students understand it. And then again, what you're looking at, this does not mean that your student should learn all of these words. This is for you. This is what we really, it's a scaffolding process, and you'll know if you can introduce any of these words. So first of all, let's look at, I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to read what's on the screen. Why should we even teach because, but, and so? Okay, we have all these bulleted items that we're very familiar with and aware of, but here is the reason because, but, so is so powerful. Well, it gives kids skills to be able to answer an extended response like our assessment does. And the intent of it is that we help alleviate those 1 and 2 word responses that students give us, both orally and in their writing, because this is a written language structure. So let's look at our first example. The book that the students have heard orally, Why Can't Gerald Dance? That's just an open-ended question. Kids could answer, give you 1 or 2 words. They don't have to really think about it. They just remember what the story said. But when we use because, but, and so, Gerald can't dance because he is clumsy. But he learns to move in his own way, so he feels sad. Gerald can't dance, so he feels sad. So this is much better than, why can't Gerald dance? He doesn't know how. That would be a typical answer. We want specifics, and students can go back in the text, or you can have multiple choice words written on the board, whatever works best with your students. Now,
Carol, in the chat, one had said, I would think teaching because, but so that it would help them start to understand citing and restating.
Absolutely. Thank you for including that. If you get me started on these strategies, I could take us for 4 hours, and I know you don't want that. So I'm so glad when some of you jump in and you see the connection of things that are really important for our K2 kids. And the one thing that I caution you, and they cautioned us, don't take these as simple strategies. There's science behind them related to the brain cognition of a K2 student, even though it started in high school. So that's why, you have the book, and we talked about this last time. The book was written prior to this training. So you have the book with lots of wonderful information for you and ideas that you could use, but the PowerPoint you're getting access to breaks it down for K2. So let's move on. Here is an example from a second grader. The sun is important to the earth because the sun gives us light and heat. So this teacher has not only had the students write, but still allowing that opportunity to draw. So again, I want to share all these examples because I don't want you to think it's strictly the templates that are included in the training. There's that you know what your students need. Here's another example. Spring is a great season because, or, but. And, you know, those are completely different types of answers. Now, the connection, the transition, if we were putting this together for a paragraph, is that the student has answered, you can play outside. And the student has told us what could happen if you played outside. Now notice, this is just the because and but, because this is a first grade example. Excuse me, a kindergarten example with someone writing for them. You don't introduce so until first grade, like I said, because it's the trickiest of all three. And I'll give you some. I gave you one example. I love candy so much. And that is my downfall. It's a true statement. So let's look at these technical tips related to formatting, because we stop right here and talk about formatting, because this is what happens, especially with young students. If you bullet, you are setting students up for a run-on sentence. Arnold wanted a pet because he wanted someone to play with. Arnold wanted a pet, but his mother told him no. Arnold wanted a pet, so he tried to convince her. You set them up. Now, these aren't bad run-on sentences in this example, but that is the reason the line should begin after the word pet. And when you look at the example with the red X at the bottom of the page, you set them up to begin a sentence with a capital letter that you have been trying so hard to reinforce. The thing about because, but, and so is they're always in the middle of a sentence. So we don't want to unintentionally set them up. And remember, you want the line to begin immediately following the conjunction, and you want to tell them about comma placement if it's necessary. You don't make a big deal out of it. You just say, and knowing what a comma is and doing worksheets on comma placement, we're gonna just jump right in with it. So the next slide is the examples of the templates that you have access to. The one on the left is the 312 example, and the one on the right is, excuse me, is designated for K2. But you know what your students can do. And the thing about the templates are they make sure your formatting is correct. And we always have to remember autocorrect. I cannot tell you how many crazy things, and I know all of you experienced it, that we sent because autocorrect took care of it. So here is another scaffolded example of how to introduce using pictures or visuals. Because remember, you're doing all this orally. And this is just an example of but and so. Now let's look at this one again. watching out for common errors. And I've already mentioned the error in this one. I love summer so much. The student, because the sentence stem sets students up to do that. Now remember, so it's not introduced to first grade, so kindergarten teachers, you don't have to worry about this. This is one of the reasons that TWR and just really advocates for teachers to do an anticipated response, whether you write it out. Of course, they advocate writing it out, but sometimes that's not always available to you, the time to do that, but you're thinking in your head. And always, I always say, go to so first to see if your sentence stem doesn't set students up to use so as a modifier. So here's the revised sentence stem. Instead of I like summer, it's summer is great because, but, and so. Another example. I know you can't see this, so I'm going to pop something in just. These students are studying tall tales, and they have particular vocabulary words that the teacher is wanting them to learn. The words legendary, tall tale, and proud. And so the teacher intentionally embedded those vocabulary words into the sentence stem. And so this helps them not only comprehend text, they're comprehending the meaning behind the vocabulary word. And that's what's most important. So that's what you can't read at the bottom. And the teacher even highlighted and made them, well, actually the teacher made them bold. In this second part here I created, I highlighted it a little. So take a second and think about that and see if you have some feedback about how this would help teach vocabulary. All right. We'll move on to more examples. All right. You see the sentences that have check marks in front of them. Read the two that do not have check marks. The reason the first one's not right is because we want students to understand it should be a change of direction. And she shouts at him is not a change of direction. And that's where this, again, this strategy becomes so powerful, because in a simpler way, we're teaching K2 students how to think analytically, and we're holding them to this strategy because, but so the way it's intended to be taught. Now, when we look at David's mom says no, so David can stay safe, that's not a result. That's not a cause and effect. The next one below it, David feels sad, definitely is a result of why mom said no. So, you know, teaching kids the meaning of the three words and the way we use them in writing, it's a written language structure, doesn't take away from the way they naturally speak at home. Or I know we fight that battle all the time because they want to write like they talk. But if we have these three words and we're saying there's a specific way. The next example that you're seeing is a teacher who, on the left side, this was normally the way she gave questions or he, the teacher gave questions before they learned about because, but, and so. They're all basic questions we would want to ask, and we've got why, what, and where. But if you use because, but, so, you're going to get much more information from your students. The kids are going to give you much more information because they do understand the meaning of because, but, so. But Chester was worried about being in New York City because, but, so. You're not changing the sentences. Now, there will be a time that your 3 sentences can be different, but when you're teaching this with students, do not start there. Let them have a wonderful year learning this. And what I want to show you next, and before I click on it, I actually follow the writing revolution on what was once Twitter, and I can't call it X for some reason. I actually got this, a teacher had posted this. It was one of her 2nd graders' response to a because, but, so activity. So I want you to read it first. I think you can. I'm sorry that my shadow's in it, but my shadow of taking the picture of it to get it into the PowerPoint. Now, Amelia Earhart was a brave woman because she tried what men did. So this student focused in on the story, whether it was read aloud or it was a decodable book. And that's what she focused in on. Amelia Earhart was a brave woman, but she died, but she was okay with it. Now, obviously, that sentence structure doesn't fit the but what it tells us is this student understood this. Somewhere in the story, this little girl or boy heard that she knew how dangerous this was, but she was ready to risk her life. And her so, don't be scared to do what men do. And I thought this was so interesting that this little 2nd grader focused in on the fact that Amelia Earhart was doing something that had never been done before. Think about by a woman. Think about that when you use because, but, so in content areas, what students are going to learn. Does anyone have a comment or anything? I'm going to move on to the next sentence structure. But I do want to give you the opportunity to ask a question about because, but, so. All right, we'll move on. Now we're going to go to sentence type. And I really, one of the things that Judith Hoffman, who designed the Hoffman method that we're studying, one of the things that she really found out and realized about her high school students when she was developing this is they didn't truly understand how to write different kinds of sentences. Even though we've taught it, I taught 2nd grade for many years and 5th grade, we always talk about it, but we didn't do it in an organized, structured way. It's one of those things I always say is assume-aside. We assume-aside, this is easy enough that kids get it, but research has showed us they don't. So why should we teach sentence type? Well, those 3 bullets there are very, we know that. And we're looking back at, I think I showed this in the first session of Leland's. I got to stay at home. I got to watch TV. I got to play. I got to play. I got to go. I got to play. All that repetitiveness in a sentence. So one of the areas that we know all students need was for them to be able to vary the types of sentences as they move through the levels in school. And, this activity is also about teaching how to use appropriate punctuation. And, there are 3 of these, I can't remember if it's 8 or 9 off the top of my head for K2, but there are 3 strategies within this suite of sentence strategies that will help students write, develop, create, and write concluding or topic sentences and concluding sentences. And this is the number 1 way. So you're going to see that as we go through. Here are the 4 sentence types, and this is the language that we use: statement, question, exclamation, command. And, as you go up in grades, it changes a little bit: declarative, interrogative. But this is what we focus on for introducing this at all grade levels when we're doing this. Now, if students start saying, well, isn't that called a declarative? You know when you can do that with your students. But when you're first introducing, we're going to stick with these sentence types. Very simple activity here. We tell the students, topic is zebras, and they have to identify which is a question or a statement. The thing about these sentences is they should be a part of what you're currently teaching. Whatever content you're working on, make your sentences come from that, because you're only increasing their knowledge about other things that you have to teach in a day's time. Now, kindergarten teachers, your students are going to focus only with question and statement the whole year. We want kids to get really good with, first of all, understanding the difference in statements and questions. I'm so sorry. Grades 1 and 2, you will introduce exclamation and command in those grade levels. Now, you'll introduce them actually in first grade, and then second grade will expand on them. I'm going to stop there just a minute, because I know sometimes this can get a little confusing for you. So I'm just going to stop in case somebody needs to ask a quick question. Okay, when you're introducing these 2 especially, you're only going to focus on, first of all, you're going to introduce it, and you're going to tell them and show them the kind of punctuation. We're not going to give them a whole bunch of sentences and say, do you need a period or an exclamation point or a question mark? We want to do it within the context of your content. This strategy is an opportunity to teach students how to read and write questions, even though we do have another strategy too. But this is where they're going to start when learning about what a really valid question should look like. But it'll be all through you modeling at first. Now you see the little please there. I've told you about partner schools that TWR has, And one of the partner schools come up with the please for teaching commands. We know that exclamation is information that's exciting or very, very important. Now, a command is where you're telling the reader to do something, and she came up with the terminology to tell her students it's the bossy verb. When you write a command, you get to use a bossy verb. The sentence always starts with a verb, and it's where you get to be bossy. But the way you determine whether it's really a good command is put the word in front of it, the word please. Please save the zebras. Now, the sentence the student wrote was save the zebras. They can check themselves. Okay, let me make sure this is a good sentence. If I put the word please in front of it, is it still a good sentence? Please save the zebras. Yes. So save the zebras is a good command. So it's all these little strategies, and I'm sure some of you will come up with really additional good ideas. This is just one that they shared with us during my training. Now, there's that pacing tip. We introduce exclamations and commands in grade 1. Here's an example, and it's a little blurry, but it's just the students were learning about community, and the teacher is posted and reads each one aloud, each one of the sentences. She has her students in pairs, and she asks them to talk to each other. Is this a sentence or not? And if it is a sentence, what type is it, and what punctuation should we use? And then she moves it around. Of course, you wouldn't necessarily have to do it this way, but allowing kids to talk to each other, they're saying, everything that you talked to them about. Sentence types, here's some more. This is just an example of scaffolding, and this one is just focusing on punctuation. This one is also functioning as a way to teach punctuation, but the teacher has made this chart to help students. So I just wanted you to have I just want to share as many models as I can with you, I guess. But what is truly, truly advocated for this is the hear, see, say. And hear, see, say is what you do all day long, every day, I'm sure. Again, we're moving up a little bit. This is more a second grade. Here is the book, our story, and we want to ask the students to identify sentence types proficiently. Once they have to slowly move to this. They're ready to generate each type of sentences that go along with whatever text you give them. And remember, when you are doing that with the text, you are modeling exactly what on-demand writing asks our kids to do, to read and write. So you're asking your students read and write, but it can all be done orally. Here's another sentence types in action, and what this teacher did when they moved to commands and knew that students were having a hard time with commands, the teacher gave them a list of bossy verbs to choose from for this particular topic, and it looks like something they're studying in social studies. Because remember, you're actually assessing 3 things at once through these strategies: content, sentence type skills, and punctuation. So it does a lot more than probably we give it credit for. This is an example with technical tips, and the technical tips is to ensure that each type of sentence you're wanting them to identify, that it lends itself well with the topic, especially at this point. This may be at a point where you're just kind of introducing and you are writing the sentence. And this one is, the community one is very valid because our kids know about police officer, what a police officer, a firefighter, or a doctor is. So these are sentence types around community leaders. So let's kind of just sum up here. First of all, you're going to teach them how to identify the sentence types that you're going to teach. Next, you move into what kind of end punctuation they use. And then we move into generating sentence types. Very simple, but yet powerful when kids start writing on their own. Again, I'll take about 20 seconds this time. Does anyone have a question or a comment before we move to the next strategy? All right, we'll move on. Now we're going to do the strategy developing questions. Now they've already had a little bit with questioning in the sentence types. They've learned what what a question is, and that it ends with a question mark, and that you're asking someone something. So we're going to teach them how to generate questions specifically in a specific way, so that, because there's so many benefits in doing so. So about 10 seconds to read what's on the screen. When we look at bullet number 1, there's a whole lot of research about the link between students' abilities to generate questions and also reading comprehension. Now think about that for just a minute even whether you're reading a novel or you're reading something educational or whatever, do you in your head ever go, what? And you reread the sentence. Now wait a minute. You reread the sentence. And so we're teaching them how to develop and be able to ask the right kinds of question, which moves us into encourages close reading, because that's what we do as adults. That's what it's called. We do close reading unless we start reading something and think, I don't want this. But when we're asked to think critically or analyze, we really have to have a purpose. So they really have to think about what they do and do not know about whatever you've read aloud to them in most cases, or if it happens to be something that they're reading. They have a purpose. And that's where, again, those who, what, when, where, why questions. I don't have to think about how they ask a question. They can always go back to those question words. All of this helps them become more effective readers, not just writers, but we're encouraging them to read with purpose, because at some point they're going to have to write about it. So we want them to have the precise language. So here we go. Here's what it looks like for K2, developing questions. Here we have the question words: who, what, when, where, why, how. And you want students to memorize those in that order. You stay with this order. And there are also posters in the participant folder that you can print out, because you can't print them out poster size, I do realize that. But you do have access to an electronic version of it that you could make into a poster. So these students have been studying the Statue of Liberty in their science class. Science, excuse me. Kim would smack my hand in the social studies class, studying the Statue of Liberty.
You're okay.
Am I smacked?
No, not at all.
In the social studies class. So I must have had science on the brain. But anyway, the teacher has read them an article and presented this picture. Now we give them the question words. You know, if a student goes, "Who is the statue?" Well, that's when you direct them. That's not the right question to use with this, because it's just a statue. So we ask them, and you see the examples there that this class came up with. Where is the statue? When was it built? What is the statue holding? And there could be many more, but what you want to do is limit the students, two students, to 2 to 3 questions, and you want to guide them, because you're going to be doing it all orally, to what you really want them to know. Not is, why is it green? So you want them to note, and you can scaffold this. If you have to give them the words, that's fine too. But what we want them to do is to know when, we want to develop that precise language so they know which ones to use. And the second one is the same activity, but we're using the cover of a book that the teacher is getting ready to read. This text is The Ox Cart Man, and students, this kind of text that you give, or picture or visual that you give kids, lends itself to different question words. Now, once they have accomplished that, we're gonna move them even a little bit farther. So now we have The Boy Who Cried Wolf. That's the picture. And we've asked students we want them to start using more precise vocabulary. So we ask them to describe the boy's facial expressions. When you get down to number 3, you want to lead them to whichever sentence that you want to use, for them to use different, synonyms, basically. So with number 1, who are the men? Where are the men going? And we've asked them to really focus in on the boy's expression, facial expression. And once we have what students come up with, why is the boy laughing or smiling or whatever, then we share, let's come up with some other words that could describe the boy's face. We don't want to change the meaning, and you may have to lead them. I could foresee, if you use this, especially with kindergarten students, I would say there would be very few of them that have snickering, chuckling, or smirking within their vocabulary. So this is the opportunity, doing this strategy, to teach your vocabulary. Here is an example of developing questions in action, and it is science this time. But this is a first grade student who's been learning about the life cycle of a seed. So the student has chosen to incorporate content-specific vocabulary. Seedling. So are you able to see his responses, Mary? I know some of these are kind of blurry. And
I can see them. They're a little blurry, but I can make them out.
Yeah. But these are the questions that the young man asked about the seedling. And you're always taking kids back to the question words. And even with kindergartners, they can remember who, what, when, where, why, and how. They can do it. Anyone have a question or a comment about this strategy? All righty. We're going to move on to sentences and fragments. And I do want to make a note here that this is the strategy that 3 through 12 starts with. And the reason being is because you have built those 4 above it. So they don't have to go through those. And those are taught, but at a much higher level. And 3rd grade can go right into starting with sentences and fragments because they're going to have all this that you have taught them previously. So let's move on. Here's an example. In the first one, the bad seed. The bad seed is always, the bad seed always scares. That's not a sentence, it's a fragment. And we want kids to know that, both of it. The bad seed is not a full sentence. Why? It doesn't have a subject and a predicate. Now, when you look at the second one, what you see, try to read that and not breathe. It's one big run-on sentence. And you know as well as I do, we get a lot of those. But this sentence is not a sentence because it has no boundaries. What we're going to do with this strategy is try to help students understand what, first of all, what constitutes a sentence and know the boundaries of a sentence. So I'm going to give you about 30 seconds. I hate to read everything to you, so I want you just to read this very quickly. What I love so well about this strategy is because we're teaching kids how to better understand what constitutes a sentence. And in the process, we don't have to focus on, grammar terms like subject, predicate, because we're not asking them to identify them before they've used them in a sentence. That's going to come at the appropriate time. We're developing the concept of what these items mean in a way that students will remember. So I love the last bullet, true. The last bullet serves as a comprehension check because the intent of all the strategies is that you are using content, you're using these strategies to teach your content. So it serves as a comprehension check also. And a reminder that all of these strategies are intended to be used as comprehension checks, but this one kind of really lends itself. So let's take a look at these fragments. We have shuts the lid, gets a surprise, the little birds, and Helen Keller's parents. And you just say the word, shuts the lid, and you let students start saying, that's not a sentence. Why is that not a sentence? Well, it didn't tell us who did it. See, here we go again. We connect back to those question words. We want students to get a grasp on what a fragment is first by really realizing important information's missing. So here's the K2 sequence for teaching it. First of all, we want to teach kids how to convert fragments into a sentence. Again, remember, this is being done orally. So you have the book, Stella Luna, Mother Bat, and then you're going to generate from the kids, what's wrong with that? Why is that not a sentence? Why is that a fragment? Using information from the text. And be very diligent in saying that, because by the time kids reach 5th grade, from 5th grade on, it's all about using evidence from the text. So it doesn't hurt that even at kindergarten, we keep saying that. Using information, or we can call it evidence from the text, and you see what the results are there. Now, the second, once you feel like students are really doing well with that, you move into identify that fragment, whether it's a fragment or a sentence. And if it is a fragment, turn it into a sentence using correct punctuation and capitalization. And what you see there, when it is a sentence, you use all lowercase letters. Don't begin it with a capital letter unless you happen to be using a proper noun, which don't do that when you're introducing this. Let's not get them confused right from the very beginning. You know, later on they're going to go deeper into understanding it, but make sure that you're, even the words that are a sentence do not have a capital letter or a punctuation mark, because you want students to figure that out. Same here, we look at this one. This example is we give them a sentence. And what we're doing here with this activity is we're building on what you learned in the first session about sentence expansion. And the one way to draw them back to is, let's look at the picture and come up with other sentences that describe the cat. And you're seeing the answers right there. This one, excuse me, we're going to move on and we're going to give the student a fragment. First scaffolded, we gave them a complete sentence. Now we're giving them a fragment. And this is not a sentence. Why? The kids will tell you, because it doesn't tell me anything about the ball. I don't know anything. So your focus is to draw attention to what's missing. So you're wanting to elicit responses from class and model the punctuation, see, in capital letters. And you've already done sentence type, so the hope is you've got kids who can answer orally for you to tell you what kind of punctuation. And here's where we give the kids a predicate. We've given them a complete sentence, a fragment, and now we're giving a fragment that is a predicate. So that's why I say having those question words in their pocket, or if you have them on the wall and you just point your finger back and forth so that students become very familiar and understand when I'm reading something, if I don't know what that means, I need to look back at these words: who, what, when, where, why, and how. So this is not a complete sentence because it doesn't tell me who. So you see the generation of sentence. Now, continue with introductions of converting fragments by using pictures again. And so we have Peter Rabbit. Students come up with this sentence. Are gathered around Mother Rabbit, and they've heard the tale. And so they're going to give you want them to tell you something about Peter Rabbit. Now, I've come back to this one about spiders because it can be used also in this, identifying and converting. And it's really good because I know all of you read informational text to students, and that's the kind of text that is used in a reading assessment by the state. So this is such a great activity to use sentences and fragments in teaching kids that they need to use the information or the evidence found in the text. So there's another example for you. These are just, I'm looking at the time, Mary. These are just some more examples of how teachers taught that. And one of the things they say a lot is to use this kind of work, especially with kindergarten and first grade, so they can manipulate the words. And then the bottom one actually included pictures with it. So these are just technical tips for you. Make sure that your subject and predicate can be answered by a question word. Here again, we go back to, and you see the little asterisk there at the bottom. These are all things I've already talked about, but this is just putting them, condensing them and putting them on one slide. You do capitalize proper nouns. You don't use subject and partial predicate. I don't think I did talk about that one. Helen Keller was. See, you started a predicate. Don't do that, especially when you're introducing this, because that will not give you the outcomes you're looking for. We've already talked about commands, and don't begin fragments with capital letters. Here's where you make the connection with reading and writing. Don't lift your fragments verbatim from a piece of text. Why? Well, you see the sentence that's underlined, and you see what answers you get in the fragments. It's very easy. Just go back into the text. Remember what the text says. We want them to think more critically. And again, this is just a slide giving you information about how to teach sentences. It's kind of like a recap, for us. And Mary, do you have time for, this is time for a break?
Yep, 4:45.
I did on the button, didn't I?
Perfect. Perfect.
Yeah, we'll take about 10 minutes.
All right, 10-minute break, everybody. So be back at 4:55, please.
I was so glad to hear you, Kim, my friend. Although I wish you hadn't caught me.
Happy to be here. Yeah,
Mhm.
I've been drinking coffee here in the car.
Yeah, coffee.
Yeah,
You're going to be up all night.
You will not. Will you be up all night, Kim? Where'd
nope.
she go?
I was
Nope.
sleeping.
Are you one of those that it doesn't affect? Boy, I would.
Me too. I can't drink coffee right now.
It'll keep me awake during the day, and then I'll even have probably a cup or two of tea tonight. Of course, I need to be up a little bit. I got to finish getting ready for the training with Dion in the morning.
Oh.
You'll
Will
be
the
buzzed.
PowerPoint be included in the folder, Carol? Because I didn't see the PowerPoint in her folder.
Did I forget to post it?
Well, that's okay because
I will.
if you
I can do it.
okay. Okay. Sounds good.
Okay.
Yes, it will. Yes, it will. Thank you, Jill.
Well, I can't seem to figure out how to.
Just stop sharing. You can maybe stop sharing. That might help.
Yes. There we go.
There you
now
go.
I can get over there. You know, I know what's happened. I revised it.
Yeah,
and went in there and took it out and forgot to put it back in.
that'll do her.
There.
Yep,
Let me get down here.
been there, done that. Well, Carol, I am excited that Alex and his wife, Megan, are going to come and check out your house. I hope that all works out.
Yes. Oh, I would love for it to. It would be so convenient for him.
That would
I,
be.
I think when it only takes him 4 minutes to get here, and I've got wonderful neighbors. Oh,
Uh, well, uh, well,
That
that's
is
sweet.
exciting.
Isn't
yeah.
that exciting? I'm excited for him to come and look at it.
Well, I sure did forget to put it. I mean, not that I was doubting you, but it's just like I see it. I thought I had one in there. Yeah, I did, but
Yeah,
I
you
took it
did.
out. I took it out.
That's all right. That's okay. I was looking around and I was going to ask you at the end, but Jill's on the
No,
phone.
we had
She's
time to do it.
checking it.
It's
Oh, yeah.
uploading it right now.
Awesome.
I like to have them in there in case any of them wants them to
Oh,
type.
yeah. I see it.
It
I
is.
will.
It's there now.
Perfect. I will drop a copy of it in the chat too for him.
Right. Sorry about that.
Oh, no worries. No worries, Carol.
All right. Where'd my
Yep.
Zoom? Where'd my Zoom go? Oh, you're right there. You were.
I'm right here.
You were in the bleachers of UK's football stadium.
Well, okay.
I can't be that good. You know, the photo I've got, the screen saver.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Oh, I was in the bleacher.
Yeah, and
Okay,
you were in
then.
the bleachers and I was overlooking you. Sorry about
Oh,
that.
you
Now,
were fine.
now I'm
You were
resharing.
perfect. I'll be right back.
Okay, you're
Step
fine.
away just a second.
Hey, Carol.
Yeah.
Um, question. Do you know if, and I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask anyway. Does TJ Maxx ever take Marshall's returns, or do you absolutely have to get back to a Marshall's?
You know, I don't know the answer to that one. I would say they would because they're all the same company.
Right.
And I'd say it's also depend on the store whether they want to do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. I'd
But
say you're right.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're the same company.
I just thought I'd check. I wonder if anybody out there in Zoom land knows.
That's true. Someone may have done it. You never know till you ask, do you?
No. How are you feeling?
I'm sorry, what?
How are you feeling? Are you feeling any better?
Well, I noticed my voice is still giving a little bit. And that started after the antibiotic. But Other than that, it's just going to take a little time. And I'll have
yeah.
this weekend. That's why I knew I could be. Alex and his wife we're gonna leave the office at 11. His wife come at 11, and we're gonna come down here to the house.
Oh, that's great. Well, that works out for me. I'm probably gonna have to leave about 2 tomorrow. Actually, maybe about 1:30. You're talking about tomorrow or Monday?
I was talking about Monday.
Oh, okay. Then yeah, that one thing. Yeah, I'll be there Monday. So whenever you guys get back or whatever, I'll be right there.
I live in such a crazy inside my head, I guess. I had forgotten tomorrow is actually Good Friday, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yep.
Sadie and Ian are going to do part of the Easter program at their church on Sunday. So I'm going to
Awesome.
go see
Yeah.
that.
Well, Arwen has to work at Moorhead. She's on duty this weekend, of course, because she's one of the low men on the totem pole. And I guess because everybody else managed to sign for this weekend off, that it automatically went to her, including the other people that were newbies too. So anyway, so she has to work, and that means we're going to go to her. So we all went to church last Sunday, for Palm Sunday, and we forgot to take a picture together as a family on Easter like we used to, but that's okay. So we're gonna go down to see her and take her a basket. It's just not Easter unless she gets a basket.
That's absolutely right. I don't care what age they are. They need an Easter basket.
At the end of the call, stay on for a second. I'm going to tell you something about Arwen.
Okay. All righty. We'll do it.
All right, it's 4:55.
All right. We're going to, I guess I could forgot to do this, put it in slideshow mode. Now we're going to move into the strategy for teaching subordinating conjunctions. And even when I got the book and everything back in 2017, I thought, oh gosh, subordinating conjunctions, that terminology always blew my kids' minds. And I'm thinking, I'm very interested to see how Judith Hochman designed this, that you could even teach it to elementary students. Middle school students were hard enough because they focused on that terminology, subordinating conjunctions. We've done the introduction with 3 basic conjunctions, because, but, so. Now we're going to look at the subordinating conjunctions. These are conjunctions, and I'm going to go ahead and mention it right here since we're starting with conjunctions. But the 2 things that are in writing a composition standard number 2, K through 6, and one of them stays to 7, is that we teach, it's in that content portion, we teach conjunctions and transitions. So that's why that I advocate this book so much, because it aligns so well with our standards. And if you look at the multidimensionality portion of that standard, composition standard number 2, you see that the content is conjunctions and transitions starting at kindergarten. And so when you use this strategy, those 2 strategies especially, you are meeting the requirement of the writing standards. So what you're seeing on the page, we did the 3 basic with because, but, so, but these are 10 subordinating conjunctions that are commonly and frequently used in any written text. And are we going to throw these all out at K2? No, sir. That's why she developed said we've got to come back to the table and develop something to help K2 know how to introduce these so that when they hit third grade, they're going to have some background. Now, if you notice, every one of these commonly used subordinating conjunctions are capitalized. Now, when we use because but so, we don't capitalize them because they're in the middle of the sentence. But subordinating conjunctions are always used at the beginning of the sentence in written language. And we're going to talk about that. You're going to see it as we go through. Now, here is the recommended. As you can see, K and 1 are going to have be taught the first 4 because they know those words. After, before, when, if. In second grade, we pick up and start with although, even though, since, whenever. Now, unless and while even though they're the basic ones, for part of the conjunctions, we kind of hold off to them. So don't worry about those 2 unless you want to move into that. But what we do with this, this is in terms of pacing and how kids will understand it. And the first way to show them and talk about subordinating conjunction is to show it in a text. And what you're seeing on the screen are some excerpts from Shakira's Cycling Adventure. And what you see underlined in red are sentences using subordinating conjunctions. So take just a second and read those. Now, the reason that we do this is so that we want students to understand why this is important for them to learn, because we want to teach them how to write like an author. And all the books they read, every piece of text, anything that you're reading out loud to them, we want them to listen for those words, the supporting conjunction. Now, in the sentence expansion, we start with the when. So we're going to point out, look for what the author is doing, and it's called a subordinating conjunction. We kind of have already told them that the word when, you always tell the when first. Now we're going to add some others that are always used. So why do we teach subordinating conjunctions? And I haven't referred to the pages on the screen, but you can get more background and more info. You already know that. But number 1, it's a written language structure, and that's why we show them first in a popular, or some kind of story or some kind of content text where it's being used several times. Show that to students. It develops complex sentences without killing ourselves to try to teach them what constitutes a complex sentence. That was one of the hardest things with 7th graders when we did the writing portfolios. I never could really nail down a teaching strategy that really helps teach kids what constitutes a complex sentence. We're going to do it by teaching subordinating conjunctions very easily, and you will be the introduction to that. It improves and checks reading comprehension, and again, we're addressing vocabulary. So here's an example, something very, very simple. you're showing students and help eliciting answers from them. After I do homework, comma, I watch television. And here's another thing we're just going to tell them. When you use a subordinating conjunction and you have the subordinating conjunction phrase, it's always followed with a comma. And you have the visual there showing students when they use these words, there's going to be a comma. Here's another one. It is a longer, what you're seeing, the first one was a starting point. And now, once they have, have had a lot of practice with that and are ready to move on, we can add the if. It's a conditional word that kids are going to be very familiar with. It's like, if you clean your room, I'll let you play your video game. So they're very, they'll be very familiar with if. But, I don't know, well, I do know, because in college, I did all that kind of thing. But when I was teaching students to write, I did not use the terminology of subordinating conjunctions. And it was one of those things I think when I think back, it's one of those things I assumed they knew. I assume because we used all of these words in everyday language so much, but when they're asked to write, it doesn't follow through, and you all know that. So we're going to use a strategic process of teaching it. Now, here's a scaffolded example where the teacher, this is out of content, but it's something that you're teaching students that's very familiar. And the teacher has circled the subordinating conjunction to remind students that they should add a comma before they write their answer. That's just a scaffolding. Here's another one. This is an example in content in English language arts, Chicks and Salsa. The teacher has written it. This activity, the way the teacher has designed this one, this is an activity to better understand the events of the text. Look at the subordinating conjunctions. Before the chickens made salsa, after the ducks were inspired by the chickens. So we're helping them align events. We're helping them do punctuation. You're checking content. There's so much that happens in this activity. Now, in this example, you're seeing science used. Same thing. But now we've moved into, even though we can't see water vapor, when the air gets cold, before it rains, we've taken away that open-endedness of questions we have a tendency to ask kids. Why can't we see water vapor? What happens when the air gets cold? If it's raining, what happens? We're not leaving it open-ended. We're asking them to specifically give us information they learned in their content area. Now, here you see the samples of the way teachers have used it again, and she is the Hoffman method is a big promoter, as you can see, of using sentence scripts with the younger students. And the whole reason is that when they choose something wrong, you're able to manipulate it, or they're able to manipulate it easier when they think about it and think maybe that doesn't work. And so there's just so much good use of the sentence script. Now, when you're looking at the example at the bottom, you're seeing a timeline used. After the caterpillar came out of his egg, he ate a lot of food. Before the caterpillar became a butterfly, the two sentences some other things happen in the timeline that you are asking them certain things. Now, does anyone have a question or comment about subordinating conjunctions? It's not going to be, when you saw the word, I'm sure you thought, what? I did. But where you're taking them, it's not as hard as where they're going to go when they get to middle and high. All right, we'll go on to the next one, sentence combining. Now, sentence combining gives students 2 or 3 short, or sometimes 3, definitely start out with 2, declarative sentences. And we're asking them to combine the ideas in them to create one longer sentence. Now, I know that sounds to you like probably at this point, because it did to me, I thought we did this in sentence expansion, but it is a more harder, I guess we want to do, we're increasing the rigor when we do this. And see, if you notice the pacing tip you see on the screen. This is not, sentence combining is not a strategy that is required for kindergarten and first grade, unless you as the first grade teacher at the end of the year want to start moving into it and see what your students know about it, because you know it's coming second grade, that's fine. But we're going to ask them to use these 2 sentences, and you do see the example of 3 sentences, and combine them into one sentence. So, why should we teach sentence combining? Take just a second. All right, research supports numerous research has been done about the best way to teach grammar and usage is not to isolate it and do worksheets with it, because it's been proven that they need to use it in context. Well, the sentences that you choose, the short declarative sentences that you choose to give your students, comes from that content, whether it be English language arts, science, social studies, music, art, whatever it is that they're studying. And, you know, it was reiterated over and over to us during the training about the teaching grammar and usage, and how the research they've done with their partner schools about how knowing this and using it this way to teach grammar has increased their students' ability to use the correct grammar and usage. Now, encourages more complex sentences. Absolutely, you're putting together 2, and it gives students various options for creating sentences. So let's go back to, I got to do this, I got to do that, I got to. So when we're doing this, we're helping with that. When they're using this strategy of sentence combining, they don't have to worry about syntax. They worry about how to bring sentences together in one sentence, one longer sentence that makes sense. And see, you've already, by the time you get here, you've already built the groundwork for that. So this becomes easier for them to do what you're asking them to do. And it can be done in a variety of ways, but this is what we're going to do. I'm going to walk you through some strategy, some ways, some scaffolded ways to do it, and you will decide which is best for your student. Right here we have something very, very simple. Mary went swimming, Bob went swimming. How do we combine that sentence? And you know, you're going to have some of your students give you very elaborate sentences. But what you want to do is keep them simple. You want to bring them back to simplicity, because this is the groundwork for learning it, the stages for learning sentence combining. Now, I don't know what happened to that slide. I apologize very much. I'll read it. Kim likes apples. Kim does not like bananas. And a combined sentence can be Kim likes apples, but she does not like bananas. And what happened here, I don't know if you can see it, Kim and she, this is where we start teaching students how to interject a pronoun. So we're going to, if you haven't already done something with pronoun, Kim likes apples, but she does not like bananas. And the way you do this is you put Kim up there first, and then you say, we've got Kim's name up there twice. That doesn't really sound good. What could we use? And you elicit answers from your students. So if you haven't already started, this is where you can begin introducing pronouns. Now, here is another example. Peter saw that it had snowed. Peter put on his snowsuit. You see, these sentences are different. Take a look at them, read them. What we see here is a student who had obviously really liked because but so, and chose to reverse the sentence, and that's okay. But if this is hard for your students to do, you decide, if you have a student come up with that, how you want to turn it around. But what you're seeing, the so means as a result. So Peter saw that it had snowed. As a result, he put on his snowsuit, And then Peter put on his snowsuit because, well, why did he put on a snowsuit? He saw that it had snowed. So, your kids will always go back to some of the previous strategies, and you make the decision of how you want to handle that. All right, any questions or comments on sentence combining? We're working it down, folks. All right, let's move on to scrambled sentences. Now think about this for a minute in terms of teaching this suite of sentence strategies. Students could not do scrambled sentences first. They're not ready. They don't have all the knowledge, background about what constitutes a sentence. So sticking to the fidelity of the order there is so important. So look where scrambled sentences are introduced. They're not introduced until second grade for one of the reasons of what I said just a minute ago, but the most important reason is their brains aren't ready to go there. Now, in this day and age, with the games they play, video games they play, they might be ready. And again, first grade teachers at the end of the year, if you want to throw one out and see what happens, you're going to have the knowledge and the background of how to do it in a way that it sticks, or we want it to stick. So that's very, very simple what you're seeing on the screen. Salt contain water, oceans. You have to decide which is the first word, and it's going to begin with capital letter, and what type of sentence it is, and you're going to use the proper punctuation. So why do we do this? And just like we saw the example a minute ago, it promotes the ability to discern sentence boundaries. In other words, we're trying through all of these strategies in teaching students what constitutes a sentence is there are boundaries. You can't just keep on going. Whatever thoughts are in your head, there has to be a stopping point for the reader. And again, it's a great check for vocabulary that you've already taught or maybe already introduced to the class. And so this is very good for content areas especially. So here we see some examples of scaffolded ways to do it. This one, the teacher has circled the first word as they're, especially as they're letting students do this, maybe on their own or in pairs, not writing it, but talking about sentence order and what needs to be capitalized and what kind of punctuation is needed. So the teacher is giving them the first word. Now, the best way and what they wholly advocate for introducing scrambled sentences is bring it off the page. After you've done something very simple like the previous slide, now get down to work and let kids manipulate it. So that's what you're seeing there. It's to cut it up in sentence strips and have students physically move the words around because we want them to be able to, they're able, let me rephrase that. They're able to show you the comprehension they have of whatever you're teaching. And so when you see it, you're walking around and you see it in the incorrect order, that gives you a red flag immediately. They're not really understanding certain things. Here's another slide that shows you teacher tips on teaching what to do and what not to do. And remember, all of these strategies that you've seen, you haven't seen give students 10 sentences to unscramble or 10. It's always a short amount because where the knowledge and where the critical thinking for students comes into play is you all talking about. So avoid too many function words. You see the list. Keep your sentences simple, no more than 3 to 5 words, and provide a maximum of 1 to 2 sentences per lesson. And what you're seeing at the end is an example of a student who has added a word. Obviously, the sentence makes sense, but that's not your intent in teaching it. And so you caution students, you can only use the words that are on the board or on the sentence strips or whatever. Your sentence can only use words that I've provided. You can't add any more. Now, this is a very quick, short strategy. Anyone have questions? All right, we're going to move right into transitions. Now, you remember I said in connection to our standards, conjunctions and transitions are the two biggie expectations for you as a teacher in Kentucky. K6 and 7th grade drops off conjunctions and just the content is transitions. Now, at 7th grade, that doesn't mean you don't help students with conjunctions by any means, but accountability, when we're talking about accountability. Now, when you incorporate transitions into your writing, it allows students to show the connection between the ideas they're trying to present. And again, you are the ground level of helping them to get to be able to make their sentences longer. Think about all of the skills we've come to, all the strategies we've used, the skills that students have. Let's say they have proficiently developed by the time we get to transitions. What we're shorting, I'm so sorry. The medicine I'm taking since I've been sick makes my mouth dry. And so I'm not doing a good job, and I apologize. But our whole intent is to get students away from those short, choppy sentences. We want them to be able to make bridges between their thoughts. That's why so many of our high-level students are unable, once they start taking on-demand writing tests, are good students that know the content. They have ways to show us what they know, but they haven't done it at a proficient level. So this is one of the strategies that helps with that, especially once the student moves up in grades, and then they're going to have to write full paragraphs, which turn into full essays, and so on and so on. So let's look at the transition. I've already said all that, so I'm skipping that slide. Sorry, I didn't stop there. You can go back and read it again if you need to. But let's look at the transition words that your students are going to be expected to know about. Now, there is a K2 poster, and there's also a K2 poster for transitions, and it's called a K2 mini poster. So you have the ability to make a classroom poster and or some you want to take to their desk when you're doing the strategy, and when you're doing it orally so they can refer to it. What we want to do is help students understand that different transitions signal different kinds of information. And I don't have to read those charts to you. You know that if you're using first, then, next, and finally, you're using time and sequence. So you're going to be very selective about when you use a transition, depending on what type of relationship you're wanting students to show. So again, you have access to those. So let's look at some examples that are intended to be done orally. Ms. Walker's class follows an extra special morning routine. And all that you will have up, obviously, is first, next, then, finally. We greet our teacher and classmates, so on, so on. And we focus on one transition. I'm going to pop back a minute. We focus on each one of these using sentences. And what she suggested, let's say you've taught to add information words, 2 for illustration, and then stop a while and maybe interchange those sentences so that you can get them to choose. Well, which should I use? Add information transition or illustration transition? So now I've come back to this. You have another example from science. A butterfly has an interesting life cycle. First, next, and I know that's a big part of the early primary is teaching sequence. Here is an example of once they have gotten this. This actually is a 3rd grade example, but I wanted to share it with you. So, sometimes you need to know where we're going. How far will you take kids? And this teacher chose to use the K2 poster. but you can tell, look at the content, and that doesn't mean you can't do more difficult. But when we look at, I'm going to jump you to the last sentence. The zebra is related to a horse. What do I want to say? Well, I'm getting ready to show a change of direction. So I think I'm getting ready to show a change of direction. So let's look at those two words. Let's figure out, will they make sense? And you see again, you're telling them about the comma. You're not asking them, especially when you're introducing, you're telling them a comma will go after the transition word. However, and they've learned in the book, they are not the same species. Then let's go up to the first one. Zebras have adapted to their environment. How can I show? What did I learn from my text that told me they can adapt? Well, they've got stripes. So what word can I use? And you go to the illustration chart, I can use, for instance. Could I have used, for example? Sure. And what you're seeing is the word is capitalized because it's the first word in the second sentence. See, we've done a transition. We're showing them that the second sentence supports the first one. And then we have the therefore, which comes from the cause and effect chart. The greedy zebra is endangered. What did I learn from my book that was the cause and effect? Therefore, so on and so on. So it's all done orally. So when you see these things, just know you are putting, you are building tools in a toolbox for these kids for when writing, they're really held accountable for the writing. So watch out, student common errors. Let's look at the first one. Zebras have adapted to their environment. For instance, their stripes help them camouflage. Zebras have adapted to their environment. Camouflage. Does, for instance, I took out, and I know all of you were probably taught this, we asked them to take out their transition word. We've given them these two sentences. Now, it's already marked out for you. I'm sorry. But what we want to do is to give them those two sentences and for them to decide which one is a sentence using a transition word. And the way we do that is to tell them, cover your transition. So that's what the second sentence there is representing. Zebras have adapted to their environment, camouflage. That is not a complete sentence. Camouflage is not a complete sentence. But I go back to the other one and I take out, for instance, zebras have adapted to their environment. Their stripes help them camouflage. So what we're telling students and we're reinforcing with students is that when you take the transition word out, it has to be a complete sentence. So this is as far as we take students with these sentence strategies. And I know, I'm sure these seemed very short to you today, but the importance of them is just, there's no words for that. So I'm going to stop here. I'm going to ask for questions or comments. And we're getting ready to close up shop, folks. See, I'm cutting it short because I want them to know this is easy. It doesn't take her a whole day to incorporate these strategies. All right, this slide is just a reminder to go on to the website, register, it's free, and oh my goodness, when you register, you want to click on and you see resources, click book resources. That's the one that's free. And I was just on there yesterday or day before yesterday, just double checking a lot of things, and more has been added to the free. And there are lessons, for K2 being added. But there are some 3-5 that I think K2. Also, as of now, there are still 74 videos, but because I was given the opportunity by KVEC to have the full training, for 1 year, I have free access to the paid one. So I get to go in there. There are more than 74 videos available, but those 74 are great. I think, and they keep adding too, because when I first started doing this training, there were only 60 something, and they're up to 74 now, even on the free site. And in your folder, here you see, if you have your book and you can look at it, if you don't, that's okay too. But the sequence, if you notice up here, the sequence of the strategies are on pages 226 to 231. And what it does, now kindergarten, you're not in there because like I told you, the book was written before this training was developed, but it tells you what strategies should be introduced at what grade level. And then if you go further in the book, you have examples of a grade 3 and a grade 7 pacing guide. But what you're seeing on the screen is the sample pacing guide for grade K2. There's kindergarten, first grade, and second grade. And you have access to this in your participant folder. Now, I want to tell you about a couple of those files. They were originally PowerPoints, so don't get discouraged when you're looking for things. Make sure you go through the whole file because, they've done this, they've created this just recently, and they don't always have the interactive online templates for the majority of them. They do. And I should have written down which ones don't, but they are available. You can turn them into a Word document and they turn into being able to type on. Now, this is what I do at 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning. I get in there and play just to see, because I want you to have the latest information and things. So I really encourage you to get to that website. And we are done, Mary, and the
Awesome.
new training is Monday, right? April 1.
Right.
It's no fooling.
No fooling. It's April 1st. Awesome. Thank you, Dana. Also dropped in the chat, Carol, I have needed that transition words poster for my second graders. I can't wait to use this. So just want to make sure you know that.
And it's telling you, teachers get overwhelmed. I did. I'm supposed to teach them all of those words. They're supposed to know. And this kind of says, this is what this brain at this age can hold.
Also, good session, it says in the chat. I'm going to drop in the chat the feedback survey. It has some fields already marked in for you so that you don't have to fill them in, like the name of the session, Carol's name, and the ELA number. But if somehow those get deleted, just let us know. A bunch of thank yous in the chat there for you too, Carol. Awesome job. And I know you were having trouble there where you had a drink, but wonderful session today. You didn't miss a beat. Let me tell you that. Never do. You did awesome. But We'll meet on Monday. I will send a calendar invite tomorrow with a Zoom link for everybody. And then, of course, I'll send you a reminder Monday morning with the Zoom link in it so that you have it up in your email. But if
I
you all
did
have any,
post, sorry,
go ahead.
I did post the PowerPoint during break that I thought I had already posted. I'm going to blame
Yes,
it on the meds.
that'll work. But that is in there. So if you all need anything, if you did not get a book, I think most of you put back in the chat that you had received your book. So tickled about that. But if you did not, please let us know. But thank you all for a great session, and you all have a wonderful evening. As soon as you fill out that feedback survey, it should send an email to the email you provided. Just make sure your email is correct on this feedback survey, because it will not be able to go if it's incorrect. And if you don't get it, just email us and we'll get you a copy. As long as you hit submit, there's a certificate somewhere.